Hello and welcome to another episode of the Real EFL Preview Show. Thank you to everybody who watched last week. And if you do enjoy what you see, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and share with friends. My name is Gary Hutchinson. I am your host for the show this evening and we have got a cracker for you. We're opening with the latest managerial changes. It's a real merry-go-round in the EFL at the moment with sackings and incomings and outgoings, and we're going to be picking up on two of those. Joining me to help you through that is real EFL expert Kyle Keneally. He watches more games than your average scout. How are you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Feeling a bit ready for Christmas now. It's literally a week away, which feels really weird to say because it feels like the year's gone so quickly, and it's just mad to me, to be honest, that we are literally the final weekend before Christmas.
Yeah. I haven't heard a single Christmas song as yet. I've kept myself right away from Christmas. I haven't wrapped a single present. We're recording this on the 18th of December. It's what I've got to do this evening. So there we go. Look, let's get straight into it, Kyle, because it's been a really, really busy week. I mean, there's been sackings and there's been resignations and there's been all sorts going on. I think we touched briefly on Matt Taylor at Bristol Rovers last week. But one of the big bits of news from this week was Des Buckingham getting the boot from Oxford United. Now, Des Buckingham obviously was a prominent member of the City group. He made his way through Melbourne City and Mumbai City. He's Oxford United through and through. Got them promoted last year, which Carl Robinson couldn't possibly do. They're on a bad run, but one would have expected them to be bottom three anyway. And he's given the heave-ho. I mean, this was a real surprise, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you touch on there that you would expect them to be in the bottom three. They weren't currently, so that in itself seemed a big achievement. We are a couple of weeks away from the January transfer window. I felt like they've been slightly unlucky as well, given that they were meant to face Plymouth a couple of weekends ago, a game that got called off, and a game on paper that felt really winnable. And just so happens that how the fixtures have fallen, how the weather's fallen, he wasn't given the chance to manage that game, and now that does feel like in some sort of way it's cost him his job. And we always talk about how close the bottom end of the championship is. There is a slight gap between where Oxford are and then Luton above them. I think it's a 4-point gap. Then after that, they're only 2 points behind Derby in 14th place. So it just feels mad, to be honest, to me. They've got to the championship for the first time in a quarter of a century. And yeah, they weren't on a good run of form. But if you look at the teams that were coming up as well, they were meant to play Plymouth again. Did a game against Cardiff at home just before the new year. All right, they're playing Leeds on Saturday, a game very, very tough. You wouldn't expect them to get a result. Like a lot of the games that they finished November with, you had the likes of Sheffield United, Middlesbrough, Watford. That's three teams in the current top seven. So it doesn't really sit right with me, to be honest, that you've got a man who has finally taken Oxford back to where they wanted to be and has been sacked whilst they aren't even in the relegation zone.
Yeah, it does seem quite a bit of a surprise. And some of the names that are being linked with the job really surprising as well. I think the big one that I've seen linked today is Gary Rowett, which just feels like a name being pulled off the usual managerial merry-go-round. I mean, Des Buckingham had been at Oxford, a little over a year. He joined them around the same time that Michael Scabala joined Lincoln City because he was one, I think, of the people that Lincoln City had looked at as well. So, in less than a year, they're going from forward-thinking progressive coach with Oxford at heart to what feels like just kind of a name plucked from the usual suspects.
Yeah, and if you kind of look back to last season when he took over and they had that really good run and they obviously got themselves in the playoffs, and then there was that drop off, and we mentioned Lincoln there. Lincoln's great run, which took them to within an inch of the playoffs, if you like. Oxford then recovered themselves and just got themselves over the line, and then turned on the style really, really well in the latter start. During the playoffs and got themselves promoted. So it just doesn't seem right. As I say, they're the January transfer window, literally weeks away. Surely, from my personal opinion at least, it feels that he deserved that chance. He deserved the chance to manage the next few games. And as I say, that these two Plymouth games personally really felt like two games that they would have had a good chance of winning. And all right, if they don't go and pick up good results in them games, then you could sit there and go and look at the run and break it all down. But the run they've been on, all right, isn't acceptable. But you're still a newly promoted team. You look at Portsmouth, League One champions last season. got beat 4-0 by Derby last week. So it doesn't feel right, in all honesty, that he is no longer manager there.
No, one manager whose sacking did feel right was Mark Robinson at Burton Albion. He was on a really bad run. Burton Albion tried to reinvent themselves in the summer as a passing team rather than a kind of a brute force team, which they've been over the last couple of seasons. Didn't really work. Now, they have taken their time with an appointment, but that has been announced in the last 24 hours. And it's Gary Bowyer, so former Blackburn, Blackpool, Bradford. I mean, he likes the B's, doesn't he? Burton Albion now. He's going through the alphabet. He's been out of football for quite a while. Were you surprised at this appointment?
Well, first of all, I think I was surprised with how long they took, in all honesty. There was talk of Lee Bell earlier this week, and Crew had put out a statement saying that they'd rejected an approach from at least one club, and we are likely thinking that was Burton. But there are plenty of teams out there without a manager at the moment. So much so that their interim manager for, I think it was about 8 weeks, Tom Housnell, was the 79th longest serving manager in the EFL. There's a post from Edward Walker that that I'd seen on Twitter stating that, which purely just sums up the current, as you say at the start of the show, the current managerial merry-go-round at the moment. But yeah, looking at Gary Bowyer, you're looking at a manager that has that lead in youth football, in academy football, before. So it's similar sort of how they went down the Robinson route before. So it doesn't feel a massive surprise as such, as I say, given he was at Derby, I think he was at Blackburn in their academy, as you say. He's managed Blackburn and Blackpool. He's won a couple of promotions. I think he took Dundee back to the Scottish Premiership. He was manager of the year there. Whilst at Salford, 2 near misses in terms of trying to reach the playoffs. So he's got a fairly decent resume as of current. And yeah, you do mention he has been out of management for a fair bit of time. So the fact that, I guess in a way, that they haven't appointed him sooner kind of makes me think that, and the whole stuff about Lee Bell makes me think that it wasn't their first choice. And I'm a little sort of amused as to what they've been doing for however long. As I say, I think it's about 8 weeks. But hopefully for them now, they've got the right man. And it does make sense to get an appointment just before the January transfer window and give him the chance to see what he can do in the window. But they're obviously hoping at the same point, given all the transfers they made in the summer, that there won't need to be massive squad overhaul. And that's why you kind of need a manager that is similar in that sort of philosophy beforehand. And as I say, a manager that has worked in youth football and hopefully can, I guess, sort of breed them sort of players. And he's, as I've mentioned, I think he's been at Derby a couple of times. So there's that sort of connection, I guess, there. And there might be 1 or 2 loans, I guess, in the January transfer window that they could potentially use. So yeah, it would be really interesting to see how he does.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, his last 2 jobs, actually, his win rate hasn't been all that bad. 40.4% at Salford, 54.2% at Dundee. His time at Bradford wasn't a success at 29%, but he's then never been below kind of 35% win rate. Even Blackburn Rovers, 118 games with a 34% win rate. So he's actually not done a bad job anyway. So he's a really interesting pick, and it does feel quite surprising that he's been out of football for as long as he has. So we will move on now to the core part of the show, which is where we look at 3 games from each division. And we're starting in the Championship, as we always do. 2 clubs who certainly won't be looking at changing their managers very soon, because they are both vying for a place in the Premier League. We've got Burnley, who are 3rd in the Premier League at the moment. They host Watford this weekend. Not in the Premier League, in the Championship. Burnley fans getting excited there with me. So they're 3rd in the Championship. Watford are 7th in the Championship. Just 7 points separate these 2 teams. So this is a real big clash that we've picked out here that we're going to look at. And look, let's look at Burnley at first of all. So after keeping 5 clean sheets in a row, they've conceded 2 times in their 3 games in December. So there's a little bit of a slide there. Do you expect Watford to breach the Burnley defence on Saturday?
Yeah, I would expect them to find the net. And I just want to pick up on that stat first and foremost. You look at the 2 of the 3 teams that played this month and the 2 teams that have scored goals against Burnley. It's Middlesbrough and Norwich. We're looking at 2 of the 3 top goal scorers in terms of teams in the Championship this season. So we're not talking about sides that don't find the net and have somehow managed to score. We're talking about 2, particularly Middlesbrough's case, really informed sides. So no, in terms of them falling off, I guess. I wouldn't say so at all. They kept a clean sheet against Derby. They weren't great at all that evening, but you're still looking at a team that have only conceded 8 times in 21 games, which is just a ridiculous number. I know a couple of weeks ago they were broken, or they were one of the best. I think the best actually in terms of goals conceded at this point in the Championship season. And I know they've conceded a couple recently, but I would still think there are hardly any teams in any sort of history going back as far as you want in the second tier that have conceded this few at this point in the season. It just seems staggering. But you look at the players that they've got in defence. You look at James Trafford in goal. You've got someone that won the youth tournament with England without conceding a single goal. So you've got great quality in there. There's a reason that he was at Manchester City's academy. You've got the likes of Steve Humphries. So they're a very, very good side. But on the flip side, you've got a Watford team. There's only 5 teams that have scored more goals than their 29 this season. They've actually scored more than Burnley have. Obviously, as I say, it's the defensive element of both sides. Why there's that gap between the two sides at the moment. But I would, to be honest, expect Watford to score, but I wouldn't expect them to score many goals. Very few teams will find the net filled this season against Burnley, so it will perhaps only be the single goal, and that kind of gives you an indication of what sort of game we're expecting on Saturday.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a tight one. And look, we've spoken about managers already. We've spoken about Des Buckingham, Gary Bowyer. Is it a surprise that we've not really mentioned Watford this season? I mean, what do you make of the job that Tom Cleverley has done? Because Watford have been a bit of a basket case over the years with managers coming and going every sort of 6 or 7 weeks. But he seems to have settled down and really got himself into the groove there, doesn't he?
Yeah, it does feel weird at any point in the season, particularly when we've had so many sackings so far and managerial changes, that Watford haven't been involved, because it just seems like it's their sort of philosophy. You look at where they are this season, they're just outside the playoffs, finished 11th and 15th in the past couple of years. So it's the first time, and it feels a long time, that they haven't been sort of in between the Premier League and the Championship. And that is, I guess, the reason for the high turnover of managers. We know that they aren't particularly patient in terms of giving managers time, but when you are constantly fluctuating between the two divisions, you are sometimes expected to make changes more so than other clubs. They do take it to the extreme. But you look at some of their previous managers. The only 2 managers, incidentally, since Slaviša Jukanovic, who was managing back in 2015, that's 16 managers, by the way, since then, which is just absolutely mind-boggling, to be honest. But the 2 managers since then that have got a higher win percentage than Tom Cleverley at the moment, or one of them, sorry, was Slaviša Jukanovic, the other was Xisco Munoz, both who won promotion to the Premier League. So it is a real indication of how Watford are doing this season, that I guess there's been no sort of question marks. There was never going to be, given that he'd only just taken over in the summer, and given the past couple of seasons and where they've been. But yeah, we're talking about Watford side that are in the conversation again, going towards the Premier League. And who knows? The Championship feels really, really tough this season. I don't think they're going to be in the bracket of the Leeds, the Burnleys, the Sheffield Uniteds, but in terms of automatic promotion. But this will be a really good test for them, particularly going to Turf Moor and seeing how they fare against a genuine automatic promotion contender, and see what sort of result they can get on Saturday.
Yeah, and look, these are 2 teams that are banging form, aren't they? So I'll put you on the spot. How do you actually see this one going?
I said this last week about all the games. I said they were really tough to call, but I do fancy Burnley again this weekend, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 win.
Okay, I'm not going to predict this week. I'm going to put it all onto you. I'm not going to predict. And to be honest, if I was, I'd go for a Burnley win here. I think that Burnley they look like quite a robust side. Like you say, I think Watford are just that step below. I do expect Watford to be around the playoffs come the end of the season. But who knows? Once you roll the dice in the playoff lottery, it can be anybody's place, can't it? That final place in the Premier League. So from 2 teams who are vying at the top of the table to 2 teams who are having very contrasting seasons in League One, we're talking now about Cambridge United hosting Huddersfield Town. You've got Cambridge in 22nd and are looking set for a relegation battle against a Huddersfield side that are 4th in the table and looking set for potentially an automatic promotion battle. 19 points separate these 2 sides, which actually probably isn't as much as you would think when there's 19 places. And it does show that it's a relatively relatively tight league, although Cambridge are clearly not going to finish above Huddersfield. However, Cambridge took a point at Wrexham last weekend, a late Dan and Lunderloo equaliser. Do you think they're capable of taking another scalp in terms of league positioning and club size, I suppose, this weekend?
Yeah, I can definitely see Cambridge getting something this week. And as you say, that game against Wrexham, and I want to start with that because they were statistically at least, and obviously I haven't sat and watched the 90 minutes to see the game, but they had 14 shots to Wrexham's 11 and had 6 shots on target. I know they needed a late equaliser to get a point, but it really does feel that they deserved and warranted getting that draw, and it felt big in terms of obviously what it's not so much, sorry, in terms of what it's done with the league table, but it feels good for confidence. And it's sort of a similar-ish theme that they had throughout November. They were taking points, so they weren't sort of getting into a position where they were capable of moving out the relegation zone, but they were just pulling the gap and just dragging a couple of teams back towards them, which felt really crucial because we know how they started the season. They were really, really poor. And then they went on that run at the end of October when they won 3 straight games. And all of a sudden you went, oh, Cambridge have finally turned up. Now let's see what they're about. And now I think they went from that one extreme of being awful to the other extreme of getting wins. And now it feels like they've settled into a bit of a pattern. And it's like most relegation threatened teams. You get points where you can. As I say, them couple of games, they took points against Barnsley and Bolton, 2 teams that you would at least expect on paper, at least, to be challenging for promotion. A point away at Northampton, again, it's away from home against a team that if you're not going to beat, you cannot lose against a fellow relegation contender. Sorry. So yeah, I do expect Cambridge to cause plenty of problems for Huddersfield this weekend, and who knows if they can take a point away at Wrexham, then I know it's a completely different team, and you compare the form. Huddersfield are banging form at the moment, but it's League One. This is what League One is about. As you say, the difference in points between the two and places, that who knows what result we could get.
Now, we both saw, you and I saw last weekend, obviously, how Huddersfield responded in the second half against Lincoln. They were woeful in the first half, and in the second half, they were genuinely outstanding. Has that convinced you that the Michael Duff's Terriers are genuine automatic promotion contenders this season?
Yeah, I think so. I spoke about Wrexham there very briefly, and in all honesty, I've watched Lincoln play Huddersfield and Wrexham, and I was much more impressed with Huddersfield, despite the fact, as you say, then how poor they were in the first half. They just felt so much of a better side. They caused Lincoln plenty of problems in the first half, and I don't think it's as fair to say completely as poor as Huddersfield were in the first half. Lincoln were outstanding. It was probably the best half of football I've seen Lincoln play all season. So it wasn't simply that Huddersfield didn't turn up. They weren't great at all. But as I say, Lincoln were excellent, and on their day, at least certainly a top 6 side. So, and you look at the 2 goals that Lincoln scored. The first was a ridiculously good goal that I would like to point out. I called at some point during the move that means nothing to absolutely anyone watching, and it's not something that I would make up, obviously, but I was quite happy to have called that. And Bailey Cadamartri scoring the second, he was always going to score, wasn't he, against Huddersfield? But yeah, I was really impressed with how they came out in the second half. They got that early goal that's really crucial when you're 2-0 down in a game. You have to score early in the second half, and the second goal didn't arrive until late. But when it did, it was another good moment from Huddersfield, and they'd been banging form before that. They were the most informed team. They are still joint with Wycombe, I believe, in the last 6 for most points picked up. Their last loss was back against Birmingham, sort of the start of October. So unbeaten in 10 games now, and 7 of them have been wins. They've beaten the likes of Mansfield, Exeter, Barnsley. So we are looking at a team that are banging form at the moment and have got a really good chance of progressing this season and getting towards that sort of top of the table. I don't expect them to finish above Birmingham. Birmingham are still my clear favourites for the title, but then I would certainly say at the moment it feels like it is between Wycombe and Huddersfield for that final place. And you look at the games they've got coming up as well to finish the year. This game against Cambridge, it's going to be very tough. Then after that, they've got 2 home games, and Stockport again. They're another team that are potentially in the hat. We don't know what's going to happen in January with the likes of Louis Barry and some of the other players in the squad. But then Burton to finish the year, a game that you would absolutely expect them to win on paper. And And I guess it depends on other sides at the moment. They are chasing the top two, so it isn't clear cut. Huddersfield could do all they can, and it's still not be enough. But I do certainly back them to be at least third this season and pushing Wickham all the way.
Did it surprise you then that there was boos at half time of the Lincoln game and that there's been some dissent as well in the local media about Michael Duff's approach?
Yeah, I guess it did. I know we picked up again on how they weren't great in the first half, but if you look at all the results beforehand, and as I say, them 10 games unbeaten, 9 games unbeaten prior to that, it did surprise me. It didn't feel right that you can have all that momentum behind you and then put in one poor half of football, and then suddenly the fans seem to turn. I know they're expected to get back to the Championship, but I wouldn't expect many fans to have genuinely believed that they were going to finish in the top two, I guess, this season. A lot will expect them to be around, but they're in a good position. We're not talking about a team that were on a really bad run of form and had put that first half in, because then you can warrant that sort of response to a performance like that in the first half. But yeah, it did feel strange, in all honesty. And well, I guess it's worked in some sort of way, because they came out in the second half. I'm not sure that was probably because of the fans booing, but I'm assuming Michael Duff gave them some sort of response at half time. And as I said, they went and performed really well in the second half. So yeah, you don't want to turn on players like that too early. It did feel it didn't sit right, but they've gone and got a positive result at the end of the day, and hopefully that has spurred them on, and they won't have that sort of performance again.
So, like Cambridge United potentially will at the end of the season, we will now move into League Two, and we're going top versus bottom, or certainly top half versus bottom half again. And this one is really going to pain you and I, unfortunately, but we're going to have to do it. So, first of all, Swindon Town are the home team. They're 22nd in the table and looking down at the trapdoor rather nervously. And they're hosting Grimsby Town, who are 7th and are probably a surprise playoff contender. We'll ignore Grimsby for now, because that's almost certainly the best thing to do. What do you make of the current situation at Swindon since we last spoke about the Robins? I mean, we've had Mark Kennedy there, had a disastrous reign, sacked. They brought in Ian Holloway. He's had a meltdown at supporters last weekend as well. What do you make of what's going on there?
Yeah, I think since the last time we'd spoken about Swindon, I think it was back in towards the end of October. So they've had Ian Holloway come in since, and yeah, we could spend the whole show talking about Ian Holloway and his time at Swindon, just in the 10 or so games he's taken charge at the moment. He's only picked up the one league win, which was against Fleetwood, I think, 7th of December. They've had some pretty poor results in that. I mean, losing to Bradford, who were well out of sorts. Colchester seemed to have turned themselves around a bit, but even still losing 4-0 and the manner that game unfolded will particularly hurt. And then, yeah, in midweek, not midweek just gone, sorry, the midweek before, they had that really, really surprise win, I guess, over Wickham in the EFL Trophy. So they seem to have had better results in the Cup this season to progress through the group. They got to the second round of the FA Cup by beating Colchester, I think, in the first round. So there feels so many things that you can talk about Swindon, but I really don't know how I see this season going for them. Their home form has been no surprise. There seems so much discontent every week at the county ground. That win against Fleetwood just seems to have papered over a few cracks currently. And as I say, the fact that it is their only league win feels really big at the moment. And I can't see them getting anything this weekend. We're talking about a team with the second worst form in their last 6, 22nd in terms of home record this season. They've only won 2 games out of 9. And as I said, a lot of that is down to the previous manager, who we shall not name, and also the toxicity around the club and all the takeover and everything that is currently going on. And we are talking about a team that are an ex-Premier League team that are a real risk of falling out of the Football League. So it just feels like a horrible, horrible situation to be in at the moment, if you're a Swindon Town fan.
Yeah, and on to Grimsby Town. I mean, they are knocking on the door of the playoffs, but they lost to third place Crewe last weekend. They were soundly beaten by current leaders Walsall in October. So it does show potentially an inability to hook themselves onto those that are above them. Does it indicate there's a gap between them and the automatic promotion places?
Yeah, I think it does do at current. I know they're miles better away from home than they are at home, sorry. So there is kind of that. Both them games against Crewe and Walsall were both home games. We are talking about the team with the second best away record in the league. I think there's only Port Vale who have taken more points away from home. They've played 10 out of Grimsby, 6 wins. A lot of them are narrow, and that feels really crucial. They've only scored 13 goals, but only conceded 10 in that sort of period. So you're not getting many goals in games, with Grimsby away from home. But they seem to be very good at picking up that sort of 1-0 win away from home, which feels really, really crucial. And if your home form isn't as great and you're so good away from home, then that's sort of the recipe for, well, it's pretty much the opposite of what most teams are. You tend to go win your home games, pick up an away point, and that gets you sort of in the bracket of the playoffs. It does feel like there is a little bit of gap. And in terms of points at the moment, there isn't massive between Grimsby and the top 3, but it seems like it's a different class at the moment between your Walsall, your Crewe, your Port Vale. It seems like even maybe Doncaster can be involved in that sort of bracket. They've got a really good manager though, David Artell, who incidentally used to manage Crewe. So we are looking at a team that yeah, I think you said about exceeding expectations this season. They've certainly done that. I don't think many people would have predicted them anywhere near sort of the playoffs at the start of the season. They struggled massively at points last season. And you look at where they are now, and they've got to be delighted with how they started the season. Whether they make the playoffs or not, it's easy to say. Depends on January and certain things like that. And it really does depend, I guess, on picking up results against teams that are around them, rather than just beating teams. They scored 8 goals in the 2 games against Morecambe and Accrington, 2 sides that are relatively struggling this season. So you do need to not only beat the teams that you're expected to beat, but you've got to take the odd point off teams that are around you in the table, and obviously them top 3 sides. So I don't know how I see this season really going for Grimsby currently, because it does feel too early in the season to predict, but they've had a really good start, and then from there, who knows what happens.
Yeah, I think there you just to close up, you touched on David Artell. He was a manager I really admired at Crewe. I thought he did a really good job with them, building them up and taking them into League One, and perhaps, whether you say got found out, reached a certain level, but he hit a ceiling, I think, there with Crewe. Was probably a little bit harsh. It was a little bit harsh that he lost his job. So to see him back doing well at Grimsby, even though it's Grimsby, and it does pain me a little bit, but they're a big club and they don't have really any right to be struggling in League Two. You know, they should really be fighting for place in League One. So I'd say best of luck to them, but I really wouldn't mean it. So that's it for this week's show. This is Gary and Kyle. We're both Lincoln City fans, and we talk through gritted teeth about Grimsby Town. Thank you to everybody who's watched today's show. If you've enjoyed it, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share with your friends. We're not 100% sure at the moment what our Christmas schedule looks like, but rest assured we will be delivering a podcast to you at some point between now and 2025. It's unlikely to be before now on Christmas Day, so please do enjoy the festive period as much as you can, and we'll be back with you in between Christmas and New Year. In the meantime, thank you for watching.